Suzanne Saunders is in the studio with us for the first part of a series of reports on what is being called the crisis in housing.
You're correct in referring to home loans starting to come down from their previous highs of 18 and 20%. Now they're in the 16 to 18% range, which certainly isn't any treat. But you have to be really careful in analyzing that. It does not necessarily mean that the worst is over. California is running anywhere from 3 to 6 months behind the East Coast in terms of the effects of the housing slump. It is still extremely difficult to qualify for a loan, so even though they may say that their rate is at 16%, they may not have the money to give you. And some builders still say they won't start building again for a year. The unemployment rate here can only get worse. So originally we worried about getting the inflation rate down. Now we have to worry about the recession.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, little boxes, little boxes, all the same.
Back in the early 60s, we made fun of all the track homes cluttering the Westlake Daly City skyline. But today, it's no laughing matter. These little boxes carry price tags of $100,000 and up. And the fact is, middle-class folks earning supposedly good money can't even buy them. For that reason, we have a crisis.
Little boxes, all the same.
What's happening is that, of course, the lending institutions are pulling back. Money is simply not available at any price.
Though the prime rate is coming down, most home loans are still at 17%, which means you need almost twice as much income to qualify for the same home you could have bought a year ago. Did you ever think we'd see a market like this?
I couldn't have dreamed of it. Last September, I was looking at 11% interest rates, and I couldn't believe that.
The big developers, like Bill Watson of Presley Homes, are now met with dropout rates of 80%, meaning 4 out of every 5 people who said they want to buy drop out, either because they can't get a loan or they can't sell their own homes. And when developers can't sell, they can't build. So construction is grinding to a halt, in some cases leaving half-built homes just standing there. For some of the smaller contractors, bankruptcy is just around the corner. Which brings us to another victim, the construction worker. This man has a wife and 4 daughters to support.
But I have a job today and really don't know if you have one tomorrow. It's just day-by-day situation.
In California alone, 40,000 construction workers are expected to lose their jobs by the end of summer. And for every one of them who's laid off, another 3 or 4 workers are put out of work in other industries. It's already happening in the banks and savings and loans, and in this title company, where the housing slump has forced a 30% cutback in staff. The boss can't say when or if he'll rehire.
There's nothing, I don't think, that can be done rapidly enough to change what's going to happen, say, on an annual basis for 1980.
But there is some money around, like in Oakland, where they're using $95 million in bond money to revitalize their neighborhoods. And at 10.5% interest, there's a long line of takers.
The demand has been incredible. All lenders have had to stop taking applications because their first half allocation has been already committed.
The Oakland program's for people with moderate income, less than $31,000 a year. For the lower income, we found people waiting 2.5 years just to get into Hunters Point in San Francisco.
But it's been hard, like we've been ridden, and the people that we're renting from, they don't want to sell. So we just going for what it's worth now, and it's too high. Now it's not even worth it for what they asking for the houses.
Imagine trying to live off of $800 a month, taking care of 5 kids and a disabled husband in a 2-bedroom home. Nellie Chagoya does it, and her rent was just raised to $250 a month. What happens the next time your rent increases? Are you going to be able to make the payments?
That's debatable. I don't know. If the food goes up like it does and everything else goes up, I'll have to decide between feeding them and housing them. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. You cannot afford both sides sometimes.
Nellie lives in Silicon Valley, in Sunnyvale, where there are 100,000 jobs and only 40 or 50,000 homes. The housing shortage here got so bad the city ordered a moratorium on all new industrial development. Yet every day the demand for housing increases. Children of the baby boom are grown up now and looking for homes. Every time there's a divorce, someone else needs a home. And people still move to California by the thousands. So what happens to all those searching for their first home?
Quite frankly, they are priced out. They cannot compete in today's market.
Right now, the Bay Area is short by some 80,000 units, and you don't have to go far to find crowded and often substandard conditions.
You're going to have a pent-up demand as we had in 1977. You'll get speculation in the marketplace again. The problem will be that the builders will not, after a shutdown of any duration, be able to even come close to beating the pent-up demand, and this invites speculation.
So with building at a virtual standstill and the demand for homes rising, many feel housing prices will keep going up. The popular no-growth attitudes don't help.
It seems that most local governments want lots of open space, want luxury types of housing, and we simply can't produce that at an affordable level.
For instance, in the Bay Area, you can't find any land, and if you can, it's limited to 5 acres or 100 acres, and the average person can't afford the land. Forget about the housing.
And if you think you can get around the high price of land by living on water, you're wrong. It used to be that houseboats were a way to avoid high mortgage rates and property taxes, but not anymore. These houseboats in Sausalito start at around $80,000, not including the berth. This one, with all cedar paneling and a jacuzzi, will cost $180,000. So, as in any economic crisis, the gap between the haves and the have-nots gets wider. So right now, most middle-class families can't even get a loan to buy an $80,000 or $100,000 home these days. But if you've got your own money, it's a whole different ball game. We found this house in Belvedere priced at $1 million. And what's more, whether it's worth it or not, somebody with money will buy it. We are in that kind of period when the rich get richer and the poor, well, you know the rest. But we aren't just talking about problems in this series. We'll talk solutions, too, like this model, which shows that a home can be designed to fit a lot which is only 15 feet wide. It's an attempt to make the best use of what little land is left in San Francisco. We'll talk about the best ways to buy a home these days and show that it's still possible to find that dream house with 9 3/4 financing. You'll also meet the Lubecks, a working couple who just moved into a $250,000 home, and we'll tell you how they swung that deal, earning less than $45,000 a year. The Bryants were so fed up with high prices, they grabbed hammers and built this home themselves. It cost less than $40,000. We'll also show you a prefab factory in Fresno where wall panels are produced at the rate of 1 a minute. How do they do it? By computer. Some say that in 10 years, 70% of all new homes will be pre-manufactured in one form or another, and that homes like these in the Sunset Richmond districts will be a thing of the past. They were built in the early 30s for around $10,000. Today, the average price, $120,000.
There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Tonight on the 11 o'clock news, we'll have part 2 of the housing report. We'll analyze why prices are so high. We'll take a look at the high cost of financing and the high cost of permits these days, just getting the permit to build in the first place. We'll look at the average income and how that is so terribly out of sync with the average price of a home today.
One overriding thing coming out of this, optimism or pessimism from your standpoint?
I am really torn. I will tell you, first of all, that experts, very wise men and women who study this day in and day out, have very divergent views. Some of them are optimistic, some very pessimistic. It goes from people saying we are heading for a bust cycle where prices will drop anywhere from 10% in the Bay Area to an average 30% all across the nation, to others being optimistic, saying we're going to swing around, interest rates will be back down to 12%, and housing prices will continue to rise by 15, 20% a year here.
How about on the fact that whether they go up or down, will the average people any of us ever be able to get back into a home that we want, the old American dream?
We're going to see a big difference. I think in the 1980s, we're going to see housing as the political issue, really. Some people talk about demonstrations in the streets, maybe by as early as 1985. We are not going to have the single-family home as we do today. We're going to be moving into cooperative housing, and the first home will most likely be something of a condominium or cooperative nature, because...
And then move up from there.
Yeah, you start with an attached home, and if you can afford it, then you get into your single-family home.
But even with that sort of multiple dwellings, such as condominiums, cooperatives, even apartment houses where everybody shares the load together, are people in the future going to be priced out of even those and live in tents or something?
I don't think we're going to see tents. I don't even think we'll see Quonset huts, but we will see people perhaps never owning, being renters all their lives, living in apartment
units. Never being able to afford their own home, even a tiny one.
And they'll just, they'll look at something else for a deduction rather than the traditional interest rates on homes.
Well, this country's been able to solve almost every problem that came along. Here's one that everybody should kind of get into, the right to have a place to live. Thank you, Suzanne.
Sky-high costs of permits and financing, just two of the factors that have sent housing prices out of sight lately. Water hookups of $1,500 each are becoming standard in some areas in the Bay Area, and although there's some mortgage money around at 13% and 14% for special development projects, most conventional rates are still at 17%, a far cry from yesteryear.
You don't buy homes, you buy financing. And with today's rates, it's no wonder the vast majority of would-be buyers can't buy. Just look at the comparison between today's 17% home loan rate and the 10% rate of a year ago. We'll start with an average house, nothing fancy, with a price tag of $100,000. Now, say you want to borrow $75,000. Here's how it breaks down. At a 10% rate, your mortgage payment would be $658 a month. But at 17%, it's up to $1,069. And by the time you add taxes and insurance, you have to make almost $58,000 a year just to qualify. Now, for the same house at last year's rate, you could qualify for the loan making under $38,000 a year. And that $20,000 difference in income is the difference between owning a home and renting one. Keep in mind we're talking about an average home where you need $58,000 income to qualify, but the average income is less than $30,000. That's why so many middle-class folks are priced out. Let's move on now to the one phase in housing construction that's rising in price faster than any other, the permit process. In the Bay Area, permit costs are up 43% over last year, and the major cause is Proposition 13. Bay Area soil reports and building permits costing $5,000 each are commonplace now, and what's even worse, the bureaucratic bungling.
I really have a hard time believing what I'm hearing from some of my owner builders.
Which is?
The harassment.
Neil Hickey runs a business helping people fight all that red tape involved in building your own home. One of his clients, Ray Aguilera, who's putting together his own geodesic dome in the East Bay. Like so many others, Ray finds the permit and approval process infuriating.
It's terrible.
Why?
Too much bureaucracy, too much red tape. They seem to have a little world of their own, and you just got to fight City Hall, really, to get just little things done.
In some areas, bureaucracies add 25% to the cost of a home just through fee after fee and keeping you waiting. So what used to be routine has turned into another full-time job for Ray's wife.
I've got a 3-tier file full of papers, a folder for each step of construction, from the foundation clear to the roof. Some of them aren't filled yet. There are lots and lots of paperwork.
So now the average building permit that used to take 2 weeks to 30 days to give is anywhere now from 2 to 6 months. And time is money.
How much money? Right now, building costs are going up at the rate of at least $500 a month just for a single home. For tract developers, they're looking at around 5 years of waiting before the approvals come through, and that's why you so often hear the term economically unfeasible.
Tomorrow night, we'll take a look at the $100,000 home. That's roughly the average price in the Bay Area. And you saw what the income is, average income about $30,000, able to afford, barely afford a $50,000 home. Well, we'll take a look at those $100,000 homes, see what you can get for your money in different areas.
In some places you don't get much for $100,000 these days,
In
right?
most places you don't get much.
And all this week,
in the Bay Area.
the series on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news.
Right, and the 11 o'clock's different.
Fine, Suzanne.
Tonight, going to look at how much $100,000 will buy in different parts of the Bay Area. Even though it's only money, it means more in some places than it does in others, and Suzanne has details.
Well, last night, you remember on the 11 o'clock news, we showed you how the gap is widening between the average Bay Area income and the average price of a Bay Area home, to the point where a lot of middle-class folks now are really being priced out of the market. Tonight, a closer look at that average price Bay Area home.
If you were looking for a bargain, you've come to the wrong place. Housing prices in the Bay Area are the highest in the country. The latest rough figures show the average price of a Bay Area home at $100,000. In California, the average price $90,000 to $95,000. Hawaii, Alaska, and Florida, $80,000 to $85,000. And for the nation as a whole, today's average home costs $65,000 to $70,000. So for Bay Area home buyers, you'll pay as much as 35% more just to live here. And we can break it down even further. We took the average price here, $100,000, and shopped around to see how much that money can buy depending on where you are. In Sunnyvale, there's such a shortage of housing, the city ordered a moratorium on all new industrial development because there are too many jobs and not enough homes to go around. So this is what you get for the average home here, with the owner advertising a, quote, below market price of $104,000. Just a row house, 4 bedrooms, 1 bath, and asking $48,000 down. In Scotts Valley, up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, all we found was a fixer-upper, offered at $110,000. It does have some rustic charm to it, but quite frankly, it's begging for repairs. And down in Soquel, this home, only a year and a half old, is for sale for $104,000. It's in a woodsy setting with ocean view, beam ceilings, and front and rear decks. And although it seemed to be one of the better values for your money, it's still for sale. And yet in Oakland, where the demand's greater, this 2-bedroom home sold in a matter of days. It was priced at $99,900. The sellers immediately got 4 offers and sold it for more than they were asking, $101,000. And it only has 1 bathroom. In Berkeley, we found another 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, and this one just sold for $105,000. It's 54 years old with less than 1,200 square feet. And even though this small home was barely within the prestigious Piedmont boundaries, it sold for $130,000. We couldn't find anything much cheaper in Piedmont. But in Benicia, you can still find brand new homes for $100,000. This one's 2 stories overlooking the Carquinez Strait, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, family room, and microwave oven standard in every kitchen. So you get more for your money here, but you'll probably face a commute. Here in San Francisco, the demand for housing is so high that the vacancy rate has dropped to something around 1%. And relatively speaking, what you get for $100,000 here isn't much. We found this 30-year-old stucco home on a busy street in the Outer Mission District, complete with bars over the doors and windows. The ad says it's been reduced to $115,000 and close to everything, even traffic. But if you want to stick to $100,000 in the big city, chances are you'll end up with a condo. This building, the Hamilton, was the first to convert from apartments to condominiums 17 years ago. Upstairs, with a view that's blocked by other buildings, we found this small, plain 1-bedroom.
You're paying for 24-hour security. You're paying for the convenience of a downtown location.
But there's very little here. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, living room, relatively small, very small kitchen, dining room. Would you pay that, $100,000 for this place?
I think I would.
I feel you'd get your money back?
I feel I definitely would.
Just because of the demand in San Francisco?
The demand.
Over in Tiburon and Belvedere, that demand is so high you can't even find a lot for $100,000. The homes start around $250,000, so if you're looking for an average price here, forget it. Of course, you might settle for a little houseboat in Sausalito. This one's priced at $82,500. Only problem is finding a berth could cost you another $20,000. And with that, you're up to more than $100 grand. Yet there's really no room for a family here. And if all this gets you down, you may want to give up on Bay Area housing altogether. That's what Bill Romano did 5 years ago. He bought a home in Modesto, where the average prices are still around $70,000 and $80,000. But he works in San Francisco, so he sacrifices drive time, 96 miles each way every day.
I found the Modesto was, at the time that I bought this house, was about 40% cheaper.
How much time do you spend in the car every day?
Oh, something over 3 hours, about 3 hours and 20 minutes.
And you still think it's worth it?
Definitely.
Just for comparison's sake, Bill's house is worth about $80,000 today, and across town we found another Modesto home that just sold for under $90,000. In the Bay Area, the same house would most likely be priced at $150,000.
Tonight we'll have part 4. That's tonight at 11 in our Crisis in Housing series. It's a look towards the future, where computers will be directing machines to build homes.
We saw an indicator of that on part 1 when you showed how they fed the floor plan, blueprint,
Oh, the
right?
blueprint, yeah.
Into the computer, and it then measures out everything and cuts it and spits it out at the other end.
That's right, yeah.
And design a house by machine.
We'll show that tonight at 11.
So the values are really vary depending on location and county. If I gave you $100,000 right now, Suzanne, and said, go out and find the best buy for your money in the immediate Bay Area counties, where would you go? Where would you look?
That's so subjective. I mean, I can tell
That's
you what
why I
I would
asked
do.
you.
Yeah, I know. But I don't like to commute. I couldn't do what Bill Romano does. I don't have that kind of time. It's more valuable to me. But not that it's not valuable to Bill, but I don't want to spend that much time commuting. I would prefer to stay closer into the city since I work here, and I found Montclair, Oakland Hills, one of the best buys for your money.
You
I'm going to be swamped with calls, you realize. Everybody's going to call me and tell me I've got a $100,000 home for sale.
Some other place in the West Bay?
Yeah, you can go down the peninsula, you can find things. The point is you have to shop around. We did a random survey here just to show, what you find in the paper, and we looked up the ads, and this is what you get at that price. And so that gives you a feeling for what you have. Sometimes you can run across, well, like in Benicia, you can get things, and if you run into big development projects, you will find things at 13, 14% interest. So you really have to shop. It's there.
Okay, part 4 tonight at 11 o'clock.
Right.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Some developers are trying to hold down costs by using computers to design and actually build new homes. Tonight in her continuing series on the housing crisis, News Scene's Suzanne Saunders has more on the house that the computer built.
Well, tonight we're going to see probably the most specialized form of home building available in the world today. It involves computer technology, and it can lend itself quite easily to mass production. The result? Cheaper homes, and that's what we've all been waiting for.
We're in Fresno now, the home base for Kellner Industries, a leader in computerized construction. This is different than most prefab operations because you don't choose a company design, you bring in your own personalized blueprints, and the computer takes over from there. It all starts with coding, transferring those architects' blueprints into codes so all that information can be fed to the computer. The computer then dishes out its own blueprint, which shows exactly how the customer's home can be factory built. Once approved, the plans are refed to the master computer. The master computer sends signals to the wall panel machines, and the machines start pounding that blueprint into a reality. The operation is so fast that this machine can produce all the wall panels for 8 houses in just one day. The accuracy is baffling. The studs are automatically fed onto a conveyor belt. The top and bottom plates are fed in from the sides. Then, instead of hammers, a hydraulic ramming device is used to push the nails exactly into place. And voila! In less than 1 minute, the computer has built a wall. The workers then add the extras, like fire blocks.
We manufacture parts of houses. They're precision houses, and yet they're custom made. Each design is different, and it provides a pleasing structure that is very livable, and we can build just about any type of house, large or small.
Right now, the computer's biggest customers are the large tract developers who say just using the computer-built wall panels saves them at least 80 man-hours per home. And since time and labor means money, the faster the work's done, the less it costs.
We might build 20 or 30 units from the same computer output. So although it looks expensive at first, spread over a number of houses, it's not. And we find that we can build one house or one small duplex as efficiently as we can build a whole series.
But don't think that computerized construction is set up just for subdivisions where all the homes look the same. Dream homes can be built this way, and they will be, because as the cost of on-site construction skyrockets, more and more people will turn to prefab and the computer for answers.
Under the best conditions, I would assume that we could put a house together in a matter of 2 to 3 hours from the time it came to us to the time that it was ready for the plant.
That's an easy one.
That's an easy one, and a hard one might take us a full day. Then the next 2 or 3 that are variations of that would be just a matter of a few minutes.
That first step, computer coding, is the key to success here. There's no room for mistakes. And Kellner's now testing a new system using sound waves to trace the architect's blueprints, thereby transferring them directly to the computer. This could cut the coding time in half and save the customer even more.
Well, the Kellner system is in use in 26 places today, including South America and Australia. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock and at 11 o'clock, we'll have pieces on building your own home, cutting costs that way. Thanks, Suzanne.
High mortgage rates have already done to home buyers' hopes is something Suzanne Saunders has been dealing with this entire week. In putting together the special, she found some people who decided to beat the cost of home ownership with kind of a do-it-yourself approach. You have details on that for us.
Well, it's true. Doing it yourself has turned out to be one way of beating the housing crisis, one of the solutions anyway. We found people who save 40%, 50%, and more by building their own homes. And it only works, though, if you have a tremendous amount of time and energy.
A lot of people look at this and call it building your own dream house. But watch out. This is one dream that can easily turn into a nightmare. Owner-builders go bankrupt by the hundreds, and if it's not bankruptcy, consider divorce. One building inspector told me after checking 10 new owner-builder homes, he found 5 of the couples were splitting up. So beware, this is one job that's full of wear and tear.
It's a lot of work. It's like a big, giant jigsaw puzzle. You know, you just try to assemble it and hope that it comes out.
Ray Aguilera is a sculptor, but right now he's busy putting together his very own geodesic dome in El Sobrani. And when he says busy, he means getting about 6 hours of sleep a night. But if all goes well, he'll end up with a 3,500 square foot dome house, built with a construction loan of $50,000, not including the lot.
I'll probably have about 60, 65, 70,000 in it.
Including the lot?
Including the price of the lot. And it'll probably be worth 170, 180, about half of what the actual value would be.
So Ray figures he's saved about $70,000 by building it himself, although he's forfeiting the time to relax and enjoy his family. That's okay if everyone knows what to expect, but a big problem with owner-builders is biting off more than they can chew. So here's a quick rule of thumb. It'll take roughly 1.5 hours of work to build every square foot of living space. So if you're planning a 1,000 square foot home, it'll take about 1,500 hours of work. For 2,000 square feet, 3,000 hours of work. Of course, you can cut those hours down by bringing in friends and sharing the load. This do-it-yourself mentality is really catching on, not because people have any more time nowadays, but because so many of them can't afford to do it any other way. So proportionately, the number of new homes built by owner-builders is going up. Last year, it was 1 out of every 5. What gave you the skills and the know-how to do it?
Absolute necessity.
Fact is, Hugh Verhagen couldn't pay for his massive project in the Berkeley Hills if he didn't do it himself. It stands 2.5 stories high, but actually has 6 levels, 5 bedrooms, and covers over 2,300 square feet. He figures the construction alone will cost him well over $100,000, but he says general contractors would have charged him twice that. So he left his job as a lab technician and became a part-time caterer, spending the rest of his time as just one more owner-builder, contracting out the plumbing and stucco.
The main thing is to be on the job when a subcontractor comes around, to make sure that he doesn't say, well, this takes so much work or material. You have to be fairly familiar with how much material something is going to take, roughly, and that you can read up on.
And sometimes when you take on a job like this, you learn the hard way. In Hugh's case, it was his foundation that ended up costing him $15,000.
The main grade beam running through the center of the house is 1 foot over to the wrong side, and that causes quite a bit of extra calculations to move it over. The result, of course, is that on one side of the house the rooms are a little bit too large and the other side are a little bit too narrow, but we ended up with actually a stronger foundation because of it.
So while your mistakes will cost you more, there's a tremendous savings to be made shopping around for used materials, like this old bath fixture. It's solid brass, and Hugh picked it up for $120. He says he never would have paid the full price. And it's that kind of shopping around that helped Todd and Darlene Bryant get into their first real home in Vallejo. They'd been living in mobile homes for 8 years, and limited to a $30,000 plumber's income, they found the best deal for them was a Wix prefab model. Total cost with extras about $39,000, though you can even do it cheaper than that.
We were thinking about buying a home in Vacaville, and we were thinking about going with the graduated payment plan. And we could have, but by the time you get into it, all you have is a very economical tract home. And we felt, after looking into this and all, that we would have something better by the time we were through for less.
The Bryant's home took 8 months to build, but Todd did it all on nights and weekends. In a way, his hands tell the story. The panels came in 8-foot sections. He followed the directions carefully, and now they've got a home worth about $80,000. And what all these men have in common, Todd Bryant, Hugh Verhagen, and Ray Aguilera, is that none of them has ever built a home before this. They all did it with the help of this man, Neil Hickey. He heads a company in Dublin called Planavisions, which is set up specifically to help owner-builders through each stage of the lengthy and complicated construction process, all the way from drawing designs to getting money, permits, and materials. And today, of course, getting the money is the biggest obstacle.
Some of the marginal people that we were able to help get financing just as recently as 3 months ago, today we could not help them.
But if you can get your hands on the money, Planavisions breaks down the savings this way. Acting as your own general contractor and subbing out the rest, you can cut costs by 20%. By just doing the finish work yourself, you can save 40% over conventional costs. And if you want to tackle the whole job yourself, the savings is usually 50% or more. But the real key to success here is in the planning. Hugh Verhagen spent 2 years going over his plans before he even broke ground. And today, he's still revising his decisions to come up with an even better plan.
Tonight at 11, we'll have part 6 in this 10-part series on the crisis in housing. We'll show you a class in Berkeley where people learn to do what you just saw.
That's interesting about the families running into trouble for better or worse, but not for building is kind of the problem.
You mean the divorces?
Yeah, the divorces.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's tremendous.
It's because they're
stress,
standing
and
side by side.
Nobody's getting any sleep.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it involves money and their whole life savings.
Well, it sounds like the ideal answer on paper and at first blush, but of course, just as we've always been taught that a home is the biggest single investment we will ever make in our lifetime, it must follow that it's the biggest single investment in your time if you want to build a darn thing.
And it can be the biggest flop.
Worry.
Suzanne Saunders takes us to a do-it-yourself home building class.
Well, you know, classes on how to build your own home first became popular during the 73-74 recession, and now they're cropping up all over the country again. The students, middle-class people from chemists to mechanics, about 30% of them women.
Can I just draw a line, David?
One of the first things you'll notice here is that the people working enjoy what they're doing, and that's crucial because building your own home is not for everyone. It's long, hard work, and you can't always quit when you're tired. But if you've got the will and the time and some money, you can probably find a way to build your own home.
What?
Take Angela Gilmer. She's never built anything before, but when a contractor charged her $1,000 just to knock down one interior wall, she figured, for that price, I'll do it myself. So here she is, a 51-year-old widow on a fixed income, now back in the classroom, so to speak, learning so she can dramatically remodel her own home, using her head, her hands, and a good measure of backbone.
First, we're going to do a hot tub and deck. After that, we're going to remodel inside the house. We're going to knock out a couple walls and make our living room much larger.
So you do it in stages then?
Yeah, we have to do it in stages for financial reasons.
Financial reasons. That's why more people are building their own homes these days. You can save anywhere from 25 to 60% by doing some or all of your own work. And even if you never lift a hammer, you can still save 10 to 20% just by being your own general contractor. It's not impossible. In fact, Instructor Dave Roberts feels in some ways it's getting easier.
A lot of the new building products and materials make it simpler for an owner-builder, especially with things like plumbing and electricity, because the tools and the techniques are simpler than they were 50 years ago, so it makes it much easier for the average inexperienced builder to do these things.
So if you can't afford to buy your way into the housing market, you might try building your way in. That's what Greg McMullen plans to do, because even though he makes $20,000 to $25,000 a year, it's not enough, and pounding it together himself may be his only way to get into a home.
Hopefully, when I get to the point of building my own house, I'll be able to do just about everything of it, with the exception maybe 10%, maybe the foundation work. I might have someone do that. But generally, I'm sure I'll save at least 60% building my own house. It'll take a while, but I'll save it and build it the way I want to build it.
6 inches.
Okay.
That's right to the roof. That's not to the level with the other sheeting.
How much is the other pieces?
5 3/4.
Okay, let's do it 5 3/4.
The key here is getting your hands dirty, getting some experience under your belt. In this case, the project's a 2-story guest house, only 360 square feet, but with wires, plumbing, and permits, it's the real thing. And this is a good example of what inflation has done to the cost of building these days. By the time they finish building just this little cottage, the cost of materials alone will run them up to $8,000. And they've already sold it for $16,000. So when it's finished, the whole structure will be moved to another Berkeley site and put to use as a rental. With Angela's project, it may take her 5 years to finish remodeling, and that's a heavy price to pay. But by doing most of it herself, she can have her dream with a $20,000 discount, a dream she couldn't afford otherwise. Tomorrow on the 6 o'clock edition of News Scene, we'll have another story on prefab and mobile homes.
For those who don't want to hammer nails or can't.
Is that house going to pass inspection?
Sure.
It is? It's going to meet the building code?
Yes.
Even with those funny nails banged in there?
Well, did you say they pull it out?
Oh,
Do it
of course
over
they pull it
again.
and do it again, and again, and again.
Yeah.
Suzanne Saunders has been out putting together the report, and tonight in part 7 of her series, she says there are homes out there far less than the $100,000 average we've been reporting on. So let's look at them.
You remember how earlier in the week we showed you how much location can affect the price of a home. Well, tonight we'll show you how you can cut the cost of housing by the type of home you buy. If you spend less on materials, obviously the home is going to cost less. And since we've all been demanding cheaper housing these days, some say that within 10 years, 70% of all the new homes built will be pre-manufactured in some form or another. This is a major prefab operation based in Modesto. The company, Wicks. The product, a panelized home, which the company has nicknamed the affordable home for good reason. Today, the average cost for a finished Wicks home, complete with cabinets and carpets, is still under $30,000. Customers have 20 basic models to choose from. After that, they follow the directions, match up all the numbers, and start pounding. They say even amateurs can do it.
Because we put the item together for them, they only have to follow a sheet that says to put wall A in spot wall A, spot A, wall B in spot B, and you follow this little jigsaw puzzle, and the house is essentially up for them at the end of this little puzzle.
Sales here have gone up 50% a year. When they first started, they designed second homes for people wanting country cottages. But now there's such a demand for cheap housing, most of their panelized packages are sold to people in the $20,000 to $35,000 income bracket who have a tough enough time paying for one home.
And what's the quality compared to, you know, something custom built? That has been one of the objections, maybe.
I think that's a misconception on the public's mind because they remember the old Quonset hut and the old prefab, which was really kind of a poorly built type of structure. The quality that you can retain in the factory is much, much better than you can on the job site. Because it's in a locked-in situation. Your walls are square, your material is picked over to make sure what goes into it is correct. The whole engineering factor of it is much better than you can do physically on the job site itself.
Some of the reasons costs are so low here, the workers, non-union, making only $5 an hour. And they have almost no waste. Any wood over 6 inches is saved and used in fire blocks or roof trusses. For site-built homes, the waste and theft factor alone sometimes amounts to 10% of the project cost. And finally, the sheer speed of the operation makes it cheap. With the help of pneumatic nail guns and assembly line techniques, these carpenters can put a wall panel together in 10 minutes. Normally, it might take 45. They work on one home at a time. When it's ready, it's lifted onto a flatbed truck, and this is how it comes to you. Just to prove it can be done, the Bryant's home in Vallejo, one of the Wicks models. The entire construction cost, including extras like jacuzzi, skylight, and microwave oven, $39,000. It was put together on nights and weekends and took 8 months. And there's another form of cheap housing that's grabbing a larger and larger share of the housing market each year. It's the mobile home. They've come a long way from the trailers of yesteryear. Today they have virtually all the conveniences of the modern home, even fireplaces. And since the design is based along modular lines, you can easily combine trailers and come up with as much living space as you want. The general range in price from $20,000 to $70,000, with the average around $30,000. Nationwide, 10% of all the new homes sold are mobile homes, and yet in some states it goes all the way up to 60 and 70%, which gives you an indication of what people can and can't afford these days. But like every other segment of the housing industry right now, sales are in a terrible slump, and the dropout rate for those would-be buyers who can't get the money is as high as 80%.
Financing is increasingly difficult, interest rates are high, down payment requirements are large.
It's the same old story. Nonetheless, mobile and manufactured homes are entering a new era in the U.S. housing market. In California, new laws will add these homes to the property tax rolls, and the savings and loans and FHA are boosting the percentage of money lent to mobile home buyers.
I wouldn't live anywhere else.
Why is that?
Well, they're economical, and there's less work, less upkeep, no lawns to mow. The two. You have a certain amount to do. Any place has a certain amount, but you don't have to work like if you had a home.
Our real problem is lack of mobile home parks for those people who want to go into parks in most of the metropolitan area.
So, although more and more people are finding mobile homes as a solution to their housing needs, there simply aren't enough legal places to put them. Most Bay Area governments still look on mobile home parks as tacky and lower class. That in spite of the fact that the middle class today is caught in a housing crisis.
They sit in an office and say, we don't want trailer courts in our town, when we're not talking about trailer courts. We're talking about modern housing. The current mobile home is as well built or better than the current site-built house.
Now, if you want to check into the prefab market a little further, you'll find companies listed in the yellow pages under buildings. That's if you're checking for prefab, look under buildings. That breaks down into 3 categories: pre-cut, prefabricated, and modular. And if you want to find out more about mobile homes, that's easy. Just look under mobile homes in the yellow pages.
It's got to go this way sooner or later because people are going back to doing for themselves. And if they have the time, I mean, it takes 8 months to look for a house. for the most part, if somebody's looking. So they built this house, this Wicks prefab, in 8 months.
And they looked at it, you know, I'm not saying that everybody would come up with this decision, but they checked around at modular homes, at tract homes, and they came up with the prefab model as their favorite.
Now they're going to have to come up with a brand new word, because you watch 10 years from now, today's mobile home will be called a mansion of some type, and it will be replaced, what we now know as a mobile home will be something we don't even know about yet. I bet it'll be that kind of trend. Or
they're even getting away from, they're getting away from mobile now. They're calling them manufactured, and they're charging them property taxes, so.
Okay, Suzanne.
Continuing series on the housing crisis, News Scene Suzanne Saunders talks about the option of creative financing. Suzanne?
Well, what you just showed there, that was interesting, but it showed just a handful of savings and loans. The majority are still offering rates somewhere between 14 and 18%, and Bank of America, for example, still has its fixed mortgage rate at 18%. But there are other ways to get money to buy a house, and that's what this report's all about.
Concerned about getting a home loan? You should be. The sky-high rates of conventional loans could break you, so now more than ever you have to shop around, and creative financing is your best bet. It breaks down into two categories. The first, assuming a loan. That's when you take over payments on the existing loan on a house, say at 9 or 11%, or whatever rate the owner had, and combine that with a new loan. Your final loan rate will be somewhere in between. Next is some form of seller financing. If the owner owns the home outright and he can carry the first mortgage, you pay him instead of the bank, or if the seller still owes money, you can assume his loan and have him carry the second mortgage. It's also wise to check the areas where you want to live to see if they have any special home loan programs. In Oakland, for people making less than $31,000 a year, there's $95 million worth of bond money being offered at 10.5%. And at that rate, it's one of the best deals around.
And somebody buying us, for instance, a $79,000 house would probably need $50,000 in income for conventional loans, but could have $31,000 for our loans.
This is what's called Discovery Bay, a development in eastern Contra Costa County where custom-built homes sell from $85,000 to $130,000, and you can still finance them with rates under 13%. That's because there's some old VA and FHA money involved. Most real estate agents don't push them due to all the paperwork, but VA and FHA loans are another good way to buck the tide.
Of course, if you feel that the high interest rates are just temporary, you may want to try what the Lubecks have done. Cross your fingers and take a gamble.
Tim and Lynn Lubeck make less than $45,000 a year, but look what they just moved into. A $250,000 home in Lafayette without permanent financing. They sold their Walnut Creek condo to make a down payment of $50,000, then took over the construction loan at 11.25%, got a second mortgage at 10%, and now make payments of $1,500 a month. But that's only good for a year.
We'd have to come up with a loan for $160,000 in a year's time, and after 3 years, we'd have to come up with $40,000 more because we have a second for 3 years.
What do you think the chances of getting that are?
Well, if the money's available, which I think it will be, interest rate might be real high, but I'm kind of a gambler and I have a lot of high hopes and I think it'll come down. I think we'll be able to get it.
We had a chance at a loan at 13.5% for the whole, the whole balance, and our realtor and the person at the bank kind of advised that we go with this, go with the construction loan, assuming the loan for a year, and see what happens.
At worst, the Lubecks will have to sell their home for getting into something over their heads. But bottom line, this is the time to make your real estate agent earn his or her money by putting together a deal that's good for both the buyer and the seller.
Tomorrow at 6 on News Scene, I'll have another report on housing and the recession and how things may actually get worse before they improve.
And the mortgage rates now may just be temporary.
They probably are.
On Part 9 of the News Scene special report on the crisis in housing, we're going to see how when one thing goes a little bit sour, it's almost like dominoes or those things that you push over that continue down the line. It's the domino effect that can affect everybody from buyer to builder. And Suzanne Saunders is back in the studio with us. She's done the homework on this one, or on all of them, but on this one. And you have details for us.
Well, aside from the fact that mortgage interest rates are starting to go down now, much of the damage has already been done. For instance, 1/3 of all the savings savings and loan institutions in the country are planning on losing money this year, and a few of the smaller S&Ls are even faced with the possibility of going belly up. Builders aren't in much better shape. That's why you see more and more ads like this one. This one is called the $540 solution. The developer, Dame Construction, is offering to pay the buyer $540 a month each month for 2 years in order to help the buyer make the mortgage payments on the homes that they are selling in San Ramon. Now, this is just one ad. There are hundreds and thousands more like them, all in an effort to keep the money moving around.
What if you held an open house and nobody came? It happened to Steve Lewis and John Perry, both of them carpenters by trade. They recently pooled their money and built their first, maybe their last, spec house on a hill in Stinson Beach. It's got 2 bedrooms, 2 fireplaces, a great kitchen, and covers over 2,600 square feet. The price tag, $290,000, and they say it has to sell for at least $266,000 just for them to break even.
What's the market like now trying to sell this?
Well, there doesn't seem to be a market. No one is looking at homes out here at the moment.
Why did you decide to do a spec house?
Well, the market at the time we started was an excellent market for selling. Now it's not.
But right now, John and Steve are having a hard time just getting people up to look at the place. They feel they built the right house at the worst possible time.
We started this about 6 months ago, and from the time we did our takeoff, material takeoff, until the time we started to build, which is about 2 months, lumber prices were up 20%.
And as luck would have it, the price of lumber is now half what it was then. At the Owner Builder Center in Berkeley, this man teaches people how to save as much as 50% by building their own homes. He'd like to do the same for himself, but he can't afford the lot.
Even with the savings, it would be hard. If I had a free piece of land, I could build a beautiful house, but the free piece of land is not forthcoming. Someone wants to donate one.
The averaged lot around here, if you can't find it, is anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000.
Even with the interest rates coming back down, most big builders are afraid to start any new construction projects, and some won't even break ground if the project isn't already pre-sold. They simply can't afford the risk. Over in Discovery Bay, a huge Huffman development in Contra Costa County, they usually build 40 homes at a time. Now it's under 10 to reduce the risk.
The Hoffman Company is the largest private builder in Northern California. They have approval to build 3,000 houses here, but instead they're planning on laying off 4 out of every 5 workers by summer.
Some of them have been on the job for 20 years. This will be their first layoff.
There's not much I can do. I guess I'll just have to sit home just like everybody else in the construction trade.
How much more work do you have to do before you're off?
About a week, and then it all comes to an end.
But the layoffs won't stop here. This is just the beginning, because when the workers stop building houses, other people stop buying carpets, appliances, light fixtures, and everything else that goes into a new house, all the way down the line.
Sooner or later, they'll all end up here, the unemployment line. Analysts look at the housing slump this way: a total loss of $125 billion in economic activity, with 1.5 million people losing their jobs, which means another loss of $27 billion in wages and over $11 billion in tax revenue.
You know, a forced recession, is that really the answer? It's been tried throughout the world. It's been tried in Europe. It's never worked. It's been tried in Japan. It didn't work. But yet we persist to try it here.
And tonight at 11 o'clock on the 11 o'clock news scene, we'll have the last part in this 10-part series on the crisis in housing. That is an attempt to answer the question, is buying a home still a good investment these days?
No, I'm not going to let you get away like that. What if somebody gets hurt and they can't watch at 11 o'clock tonight? Give us an inkling.
They'll have to.
For some people
then
it
they
is,
can
and for
ask
some
somebody.
it is, right?
Yeah, it's a yes and no answer, but we give you some clues.
But it's still
Some
a great
things to look
American
out
dream to own the house.
Sure it is.
To own the home.
Boy, that great
Yeah,
American
but wait
dream is
for 10
fading
years.
fast, though, isn't
Yeah.
it?
But wait for 10 years? You're giving it away?
Well, no, I just don't think that owning a home is going to be such a good deal.
Oh, in 10 years from now?
Yeah.
So you either get it now or you don't in this area?
That's not what I'm really saying. I just don't think that people will look at buying homes as such a great investment 10 years from now. During the next few years, yes, definitely.
That's
But you're
part
going to get
10,
into
folks.
cooperative housing and
That's
condominiums.
part 10.
So tonight, part 11.
Tonight, part 11.
Yeah. Inflation is the heart of a problem we've been telling you about all this week on New Scene Tonight, that of buying a home in the Bay Area. Suzanne Saunders is here tonight with the last in her 10-part series on the housing crisis. Tonight, should you or should you not buy a home right now? A question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah,
Suzanne.
and the question we're really asking is whether or not buying a home is still a good investment these days in light of the high prices and high interest rates.
If you go ahead and buy that home now and prices continue to rise 15 to 20% a year, as some analysts predict, then you can pat yourself on the back and say you did a very smart thing. But if we're headed for a bust in the housing market, as other analysts predict, and prices plummet by 10 to 30%, then you could be very sorry indeed.
I don't see 10%. I see maybe a little less than that if a person is anxious to sell.
We may see some reduction in resale prices, for example. People who have existing homes that are now on the market to be sold, they may have to come down a little bit in price, or they may simply not sell.
No, I do not see prices dropping. I see prices continuing to go up.
The problem, of course, no one really knows what's going to happen. But consider these factors. First, demand. People migrate to the state of California at the rate of 200,000 a year. The Bay Area is already short of housing by some 80,000 units. So if you buy in an area where housing's in great demand, the chances of your home holding its value are better than normal, especially since most new construction has simply ground to a halt.
The builders simply are not going to be producing new housing. And so I really don't see a drop in the price of homes. If anything, this is going to make them higher in the long term because of the demand.
Next factor, financing. Home sales have been cut in half not because the homes aren't worth it, the financing's not worth it. But if you study the market and then find a good deal, don't let the doomsayers stop you. Some agents will go so far as to call this a buyer's market.
It definitely is a buyer's market, more so than it's been for some time, and I think it's going to get worse as far as price is concerned. I would say, yeah, you can. This is the time to buy. It's not going to be any cheaper. If you may get a lower interest rate, but you're going to pay a higher price.
The important thing is to shop and shop hard. Like the ad says, if the owner's being transferred, he's anxious to sell. And don't forget the builders and developers who can't afford to sit on their expensive inventories any longer. Since it's an election year, many people feel that by June or July, President Carter will be forced by public pressure to do something to free up some money so people can buy homes again. But the builders are afraid that it will all be too little, too late. That's why some of them are offering rebates to buyers, in effect giving them the money to make the down. So this is a time when builders, too, will consider all reasonable offers. And finally, think about the marketability of the home. With housing prices going up so much faster than incomes, and with everyone wanting to get in on the profits, the market is getting saturated with overpriced homes. So if you're buying in the $200,000, $300,000 category and up, keep in mind there aren't enough high-income folks to afford all those high-income homes. And you may end up renting to a bunch of college kids. Whereas the cheaper the home, the greater the number of potential buyers, and the better your chances are of turning a profit.
Well, that's the last report in this series. There's obviously a lot more to be said. And with the housing situation so volatile right now, major changes are taking place really overnight. So we'll continue checking the market, and of course we'll be doing a number of follow-up reports during the coming weeks.
A very instructional and well-done series.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.